You're listening to the Minutes on Growth podcast, the show that brings you mindfully curated insights into relationships, spirituality, personal development, and everything in between, with your host, Tannaz Hosseinpour. Hi, everyone. It's Tannaz Hosseinpour, and welcome to another episode of Minutes on Growth. Today, I have the lovely Deb Acker with us, who has a contagious laugh. So I'm so excited to have her on. Intuitive relationship healer, speaker, and author of Living Deeply, a Transformational Journey Through Deep Pain, Loss, and Abandonment to Healing, Self-Love, and Miracles. That just sounds so good. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful and excited to be here today. And thank you for recognizing my laugh, which I freaking love. So thank you.
Thank you for your laugh. I love it. It just makes you smile. So that's absolutely amazing that you have it. Okay. There's so much I want to cover. So let's just dive right in. You talk a lot about being true to yourself in your relationships. In this world where we're constantly being pulled into so many different directions through social media and through our society. What does it even mean to be yourself?
Yeah, no, that's a really great question. Thank you for asking that. So here's the thing. We grow up and we get very conditioned to just do what our parents want us to do for love, for attention, basically subconsciously, so that we don't end up out on the streets, even though obviously most of us had parents that wouldn't have put us out on the streets. But we tend to sort of just start to condition ourselves. I'm going to do that because my parent did that, or I'm not going to do that because that didn't work for them, or because I don't want to be like them, or, fill in the blank. Right. And so to start to know, how do we actually be true to ourselves? We have to be willing to actually start to connect to ourselves, to know what's going on inside of us. So what does that look like? Well, one simple example is to start to connect to, what is it that I'm feeling? What is it that I want right now? What do I need right now? And just start to ask yourself some simple questions that start to connect you to you, because so much of us, and we're so conditioned to be outside and to be conditioned to how we're responding to another. And basically that's so much intent to please another, that if we can actually start to really figure out, what is it that I want? Or like, why am I doing what I'm doing right now? I'm in this dynamic, this conversation with this person. Why am I doing this? What am I worried is going to happen if I do this? So that's kind of just a little bit of a start.
I love that. And it sounds so empowering. But I've noticed in my own work that a lot of people have a lot of resistance to asking themselves these questions because they've never actually been in a space where they've been asked these questions. So it's like they've never actually had this internal conversation. Do you notice that because of that, there is resistance? And if there is, how can we move through that resistance?
Yeah. So, I think there's resistance because we're scared what's going to really want to show itself, right? And we're giving attention to something that we've historically, myself included, right? I never gave myself this kind of attention early on. So if you're finding that you have resistance, if anyone in your audience is finding that they have resistance with themselves, to be willing and open to start to go, why am I scared of this? What am I scared is going to happen if I go there? Right? Am I scared that I'm going to be left? Am I scared of feeling my feelings because maybe I was shamed for my feelings when I was growing up, or my feelings were not welcomed? What am I scared is going to happen right now? And I know that these are historically the scary questions, and, asking that's like takes a lot of presence and just a lot of realness to actually just be willing to be with it. But one thing, if I can plant one seed around this, is to understand that resistance actually keeps it more present in your environment than being willing to feel it for a minute or 10 minutes, or to have it come up even for a few days or a week or a month. So instead it just lays underneath the surface and it's like willing to come out of nowhere. It's like, oh no. And then the message gets louder and louder and louder. And so if we can be willing to get present with it, that's actually how it can release, and it can where we're no longer actually even thinking about trying to manage it or worried about it popping up, because we're actually resonating it and returning it back to truth and returning it back to wholeness. Does that make sense?
Definitely. As soon as you said that, I was thinking, what you resist persists. Like it just gets bigger and bigger. So let it go. Like the only way out is through. So yeah, definitely. You spoke about being honest with yourself about your emotions. And I think that ties into being vulnerable. And traditionally, especially in the Middle Eastern culture, vulnerability is looked upon as weakness. So how can we allow ourselves to be vulnerable? What does vulnerability look like, especially in a relationship?
Yeah. So again, it goes back to, we have to be connected to what's going on inside of ourselves. So if we're having a moment of challenge or a moment of fight or argument with a partner, if we can be connected to, oh my gosh, what he said, that made me feel that really hurt me, or that made me feel less than, or it made me, fill in the blank, right? So if we can start to be really connected to what's going on inside of us. And then when we're sitting across from a partner to say, hey, you know what, when you said that, it really hurt me, or that really landed. That's how we just start to slowly, really in small bits, start to reveal pieces of ourselves. So that's just one little piece. Now, then from there, if we can start to, again, bring forth and be our real true selves, right? So if we can bring forth our true self, which might mean like, okay, I'll give one of mine. I'm really super sensitive, highly sensitive being. I'm an empath, right? And so I am wired towards emotions, right? I am wired. So my partner, he's going to have to be one of those people that's just like, okay, hey, like this is bringing forth a part of myself. This is who I am, right? And it's going to have to be where he's comfortable with that. Another example of this, and this is where I was initially going, was I have like an OCD thing, right? I think you just get more sensitized to the environment the more, I've always had this a little bit, and then it's gotten even hypersensitive. But again, can I bring that forth? And can I bring it forth from a place of not judging myself, right? And can I bring it forth almost from the space of like, how adorable, like that is so cute about you. I think that's the cutest thing ever.
Love that.
And that's part of our journey towards self-love, right? So if we could be in that space of starting to love the pieces of ourselves that maybe once we thought or were needed to be judged, or we judged them because our parents judged them, or we judged them to make sure that others loved us, right? If we can start to love that part of ourselves more and find again that adorability, right? That cuteness, that sweetness in it, and have compassion for ourselves. It's like that's the part of me that's like, okay, like I just want to feel safe, right? And that's a way that I feel safe in my environment, right? And we can work. I've worked on pieces of that, and then there's just part of me that's like, I like it. It's cute, and I like it, and that's how I want to live my life at this point, right? And it'll shift as I go, but yeah, that's a little bit of what I would say about that.
I love that you said it's so cute. And like, that's such a great way to talk to those parts of us that we used to judge before, and stepping into acceptance. And it's acceptance in a bubbly way. So I really like that. As you were saying that, I was thinking of situations where we are uncomfortable with parts of us. And because of that, we abandon those needs, even though they are needs. And then 6 months into the relationship, a year into the relationship, we feel numb, as if we've lost ourselves. How can we prevent that from happening? How can we, so Mike, sorry, before that, but like, I know that a relationship requires compromise and a little bit of sacrifice here and a little bit of sacrifice there. How can we balance that with still honoring our needs and not losing ourselves? Because we turn into a different person when we're in a relationship. And I think that's part of growing and evolving, which is beautiful. But there's a thin line. Can you talk about that thin line?
I think, yeah. So I think what needs to happen first is to start to notice, okay, when you're not being true to yourself, right? Or to notice when you're saying things to be liked by that other person, or for fill in the blank for X, Y, and Z, for love from them, overall. And when we can start to notice that and say, okay, why am I doing that? What's going on for me that I feel the need to bring that forward? And is this the person who I want to be in my relationship? right? And I'm a firm believer in of outing yourself. So, I mean, this takes a lot of consciousness and it takes really being real, right? But if you can come forward to that person and just be like, you know what? I just said that because I wanted to be liked by you, or I'm worried what you're going to think of me if I X, Y, and Z. So if you find yourself kind of saying things that you think that they want to hear, and if you feel like, oh my gosh, I just said something that was totally either not me or out of integrity, right? Can you come forward and really just be honest and direct about it? Now, the better and stronger way, which is a huge part of who I am in my relationships, is just to be real about who you are. And the more you can really, again, so part of what I do and a lot of the work I do with my clients, right, is inner child work. And so one of the things that we do is we would talk to your little girl about that and say, okay, hey, what was that about? Like, why did you feel the need to say that? And she's like, I just want to be liked, or I'm worried he's going to leave me, or, fill in the blank. Right. And a lot of times, like, I'll have my clients just say that in the present tense, but with the idea of it leaving them, not with cementing it in or re-energizing the story, but with the idea of it leaving them. And it's just like, I'm worried he's going to leave me. I'm worried he's going to leave me. I'm worried he's going to leave me. And you can feel that just got lighter, even me saying it out loud a few times, right? And the more honest we can be with ourselves and the more we can resonate that back into wholeness, that relationship with our inner child, which is just the little girl or little boy that lives inside of us, that had dreams and desires and also was like scared of abandonment or scared of not being loved or scared of subconsciously ending up on the streets. So the more we can build that relationship, the safer he or she feels with us, the safer that little girl or little boy feels with us. And then the more that gets reflected, that we feel safe to really reveal our full selves in our relationships with others.
I love that. I love the conversation with the inner child and really bringing out the inner child's needs and kind of honoring it. I always tell people, if you can't stand up for yourself, just literally visualize the younger version of you walking by your side. Would you step up for her? And everyone's like, yes, of course I would. I'm like, well, but we don't do it, I think, because we can't see the inner child. So we don't really stand up for her as much. But that's a beautiful way to not lose yourself in a relationship. Relationships, a lot of them ended during COVID, and a lot of them actually became stronger. What do you think is a non-negotiable when it comes to strengthening a relationship? How can we strengthen a relationship that is meant to be strengthened? I must also put that out there. Not like a toxic relationship that we want to forcefully stay in, but a relationship that is good for both parties' souls and that is aligned, that is, filled with love and respect. How can we make it better?
So, not to sound cliche, but we have to be willing to be more real. We have to be willing to bring forth more of our true selves. And also, the more I keep talking about the inner relationship, because that is such a key fundamental to, if you want to have a strong relationship with a partner, your inner relationship with yourself is key. Now, what COVID did, this wasn't the way a lot of people saw COVID, but this is how I saw COVID. COVID was an opportunity for us to see where the holes were in our relationship with ourselves and in our relationships with other people. It gave us the opportunity to strengthen those holes and to notice them and to become aware of them and to bring them out of the shadows or out of the subconscious into consciousness. Now, a lot of people went into that space of, okay, I just want this to be over, right? Soon as possible. Could we just go back to normal or whatever normal was defined as? And that's okay. And there's that space of when we can start to really go, okay, what I'm like right now, I'm really bothered by this. Oh, I'll give an example of open space, right? I'm really bothered that I don't have so much to do, that I can't fill the space with like going out with my friends or being with my partner as much or whatever, right? When we can start to look at that, right? And we can start to actually go, okay, what scares me about not having something, not filling that space with something to do, right? And really, again, this is about getting honest with ourselves. And the more honest we're able to get with ourselves, with ourselves, the more that we are able to strengthen. You asked me about strengthening our relationship, right? The stronger that inner relationship is, the stronger the outer relationship is. And then again, when we go to we have to be willing to be honest at all times in our relationships. And that's the thing, right? How many of us go into our relationships wanting to present some kind of image or wanting to present some kind of front or some kind of, fill in the blank. And the more we are willing to say, okay, you know what type of relationship do I want? It's not sustainable to think that any of us could spend our lifetime in a relationship being someone we're not. And inherently within that is a state of resistance. It just being in that, like literally we're resisting our true selves. So that right there, it's heavy. It's something heavy to carry. And so if we can start to just bring forth reveal one little part of ourselves that maybe we haven't shared, right? And also you can set up this conversation to actually have that conversation, a consciousness conversation with your partner that says, hey, I want to start to bring more vulnerability to our relationship. What does that look like? And I will say, if you have resistance to even just saying that to your partner, that's good to look at, right? Like you're like, I don't want to say that. Like that would be so uncomfortable. Okay, what makes you uncomfortable about it? And do you feel safe with yourself first and foremost? And then have you chosen a partner that you can also feel safe with to reveal that part of yourself? There's like so much consciousness in what I just said. I'm like, yeah.
The second part of what you said, I was actually going to ask you, being honest with ourselves is one thing. And, creating that space for ourselves to be honest with ourselves is one thing. However, what if our partner doesn't create a safe space for us to show up as our true self? What does that look like? And is it something that we can do to create that space? Or do you believe that either they give it to us or they don't? Like we don't really have any control over how they create that space?
So here's the thing. First and foremost, it's important to ask yourself, why did I choose a partner that I feel like I can't that I don't feel like I can even create this safe space? I am a big believer in conversations, right? I'm a big believer in you have to be willing to talk to your partner, and you have to know how to have those conversations. Again, that's a big part of the work I do with my clients one-on-one, right? Because I know for me, that was a huge part of my journey. Like, how do I speak my truth? How do I be my real self in my relationships? And then how do I speak my truth at all times and speak it in a way? So a lot of us come from our masculine or from like a dictating or like that strong space. That's not hot, but more than that, like that isn't what ignites somebody to want to show up for us. Right. And so when we can actually drop into our feminine, which our feminine is a lot of times in the lower half of our body. So when we can drop into our feminine, when we can drop into our heart space, when we can relax and stop having to get it for them or figure it out for them. Or I have something in a non-relationship form showing up where I'm sitting in open space and being in the practice of the open space where you're not filling the space with like, I'm going to figure this out for you. Right. Or like we're just waiting for them, just like, hey, I'm just holding the space and just waiting for you to, holding space is a little bit masculine, but I'm just waiting for you to get it. I'm not going to show you how to do it. You're going to figure this out yourself. Right. So there's that part of it. But then I believe that we could have a conversation with our partner about, hey, you know what? I'm wanting to take our partnership to a deeper level. I'm wanting to share more authentically with you. And then again, you don't lead them, you let them know your desire. That's feminine. And then you let them figure out what that looks like. And how they show up is the information you need of, do I want to stay or do I want to go? It's not about you trying to figure out, like I had a client who asked me a question about this recently where she's like, how do I get him to do this work that she needs him to do to stay in the relationship? And I was like, honey, that is not your job. Your job is just to share with him, this is what I need to be here. Right. If he doesn't figure it out, then that's your information. And then you get to just say, okay, why this is a deal breaker for me or it's not a deal breaker. But trying to tell him, or I'm going to help you get into therapy or whatever that looks like, right? Like none of that. It won't work in the long term unless you want to literally carry the relationship for the rest of your life, which again, isn't sustainable.
I agree. And it's heavy. It's just like it's a big weight on your shoulders to do that. And I also think it takes away, from a spiritual perspective, someone's free will to choose for their own. So,
and the trust.
Yeah.
And that trust piece, right? Which is like, can I trust like that this person, is going to show up for me that way, or I'm placing my order to the universe that says, I trust. So I'm going to call in a partner who I can trust.
Exactly. I like that. I'm going to call in a partner who I can trust. That was so, so, so beautiful. Last question. If you could leave the audience with one piece of advice when it comes to relationship with the self, what would it be?
I would say our relationship with ourselves is the most important relationship we have in this life. It is the key. If you want to have healthy relationships and have people showing up for you the way you've always hoped, the way you've always desired, that creating and building and strengthening that relationship is key. And one small thing that we can do to begin to do this is just at the end of our day, especially when we've had a bad day, but just at the end of any day, sit down with your little girl or little boy, sit down with yourself. Even if you don't understand that as a concept, just sit down with yourself and say, hey, how was your day? What was that like for you when you got cut off at work, or when you didn't get that promotion, or when you got the promotion, right? And just being willing to have that conversation, and just even a 5-minute, 10-minute dialogue just at the end of your day or the beginning, if you're more of a morning person, just to check in with yourself and say, hey, what do you need me to know right now? All of those start to build and strengthen that relationship that we have with ourselves.
Daily check-ins with self. Love that.
Yeah.
We should have people schedule that in their alarms, like daily check-in with self. I think it would do miracles, because not everyone does that. I mean, even I forget some days to do that. When life gets so busy, we get so busy with life that we forget to live life. And then months later, it all accumulates, and you have a mental breakdown because she feels like overlooked and not seen and not valued and not heard. And like any child, she's gonna not be happy with that.
Yeah. And it's just like when we get into bed with our partner, right? When you get into bed with your partner, you're excited to spend time with them. You're excited to connect with them after the day, depending on what your days look like and everything. And so it's the same thing. Like when I get into bed and I'm like connecting with my little girl, it's like, oh my God, I'm so excited to talk to you. Like, hey, tell me what happened. Like, tell me what's going on for you. And you just feel whole. You feel so connected. You feel deeply rooted in yourself. You feel safe and loved. And that's just like a wonderful way to go to bed and to fall asleep.
That's one of the most beautiful practical tools that anyone's ever shared on the podcast. So thank you so, so much for that. You made it feel easy and doable, and it doesn't require a lot of time and a lot of resources. It's just you and yourself anywhere.
Yeah.
It'll work.
It's BYOS, bring your own self.
Oh, I love that. Oh, I really like that. Maybe that should be the podcast episode, BYOS. I really like that. Thank you so, so much, Deb, for sharing your wisdom and your insights. And how can people reach you?
Yeah, so they can find me on my website at deboraacker.com. And if you're feeling called to take this work further, I would invite any of your audience. I have a complimentary 30-minute relationship assessment where we'll dive really deep into some of the issues that maybe you can't see that are blocking you from having really healthy, loving relationships, and putting a plan in place to really start to shift those. So I would invite anyone from your audience to apply for that. I'd love to connect and speak with them further. And find me on my website, and I've got a blog that comes out with all kinds of great relationship tips, as well as my YouTube channel, the Relationship Healing Channel for Women.
Wonderful. Thank you so, so much again. And
thank you so much.
Thank you everyone for listening. Speak soon. Thank you for joining us this week on Minutes on Growth. If you enjoyed today's episode, then make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now.